Well, the jury, they shocked the nation. That is when they pronounced the popcorn shooter not guilty. Well, we're going to tell you today what the jury knew that most of us did not know, or we did not realize. We're going to tell you about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Hey, it's what some people call the fastest minutes in podcasting. Well, hello and welcome to another Charlie Show. What a month. What a month. You see our crime fighters there on the front line. Well, that's the cops that are out there on the front line. Well, they're involved in not one, but 7 trials this month. And not by the usual means. No, they weren't there as a witness for the prosecutor, but as the prosecuted. Now, we're going to get to that in a minute. But first, we want to once again welcome all of our new listeners to the podcast. Every single week we have new listeners, and we do appreciate each and every one of you. In fact, for our new folks who join us are those who contact us. Well, if you just contact us at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, guess what? We're going to provide a special welcome gift for you. That's right, special welcome gift for you, and I guarantee you'll like it. Just email us at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And also, let me remind you, you can go to the website. The website is charliecrimebuster.com. There you can get caught up on any of the past podcasts that you might want to listen to. And you might want to listen to last week's to kind of get you ready for this week's. Now, when you do email, and we would also appreciate if you have comments, maybe suggestions about future podcasts. All of that will be helpful. I read all of our emails, and I'll reply as quickly as I possibly can. Now, that email address, again, is charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Now, if you didn't get all that down, you don't have to write it down, because we're going to place that on our show notes on the podcast platform. You see, this past Friday evening, well, the jury in the movie Popcorn case, well, they shocked most of the nation. First, kind of shocked everybody because they came back in just about 3 hours. That was on the very evening that it went into deliberations. And then, to the amazement of most, they pronounced the defendant, that's right, retired Captain Reaves, retired from the Tampa Police Department, they declared him not guilty. Now, the thing is, most of the world, including yours truly, well, we thought the verdict would be different. Now, I have been mostly on target in predicting the outcomes of the juries in most of these high-profile trials. But I got to admit, I definitely missed that one. And it might even surprise you that even though I had predicted and shared last week that I did think that Captain Reaves maybe acted a little too quickly with his weapon, well, it may surprise you now. Now, I got to tell you, folks, I absolutely agree with the verdict of the jury. You see, last week the defense had not begun its presentation, and the trial was, well, it was led by the prosecution as they called their witnesses. And yours truly, well, come on now, admit it, most of you, lots of you out there, you also thought the defense would not be able to come through for Captain Reaves. You see, we have all been bombarded by the sometimes biased and, get this, uninformed media in reportings of shootings like this. You see, even after the verdict, I've read such headlines like this: Captain Reaves gunned down Mr. Olson over popcorn. Well, now we all know that this jury, well, they knew better. You see, they knew some of the things that we did not know. And I'm going to share those things with you, things that the jury did know that we did not know. We're going to share that with you in just a moment. But right now, hey folks, it's time. It's time for our Courageous Citizen of the Week. And our Courageous Citizen this week, well, he's tied to a shooting of one of our own Florida deputies. You see, this past Tuesday evening, 11:31 p.m., well, my phone alerted me to what we call in our state a blue alert. Now, blue alert is issued in our state here in Florida when an officer has come under attack in the line of duty. While that happens often, that is, officers come under attack, I got to tell you that such alerts, called a blue alert, are not usually sent out. In fact, get this. This one this past Tuesday was only the fourth, number 4, F-O-U-R, fourth blue alert in all of Florida's history. Now, the blue alert, it was issued because Deputy Anderson of Taylor County, well, he had effected a traffic stop near a place called Big Bend. The man he was pulling over, well, his name was Gregory Medina, and he was being pulled over, get this, for a minor traffic violation. Now, as I've often said on the program, there is no such thing, believe me, as a routine traffic stop. Most of the time, you never know who it is you're pulling over. And at this time, well, Officer Anderson, he was pulling over a man who was already a registered sex offender in Florida. In fact, back in 2011, Medina, he was actually sentenced to serve 6.5 years in prison after he was convicted of sexual battery with the victim 12 to 15 years old. Hey, he was also in possession of child pornography. Well, he was ordered also, in addition to that prison sentence, he was also ordered to serve 2 months of probation. You see, there's lots of folks out there, you don't realize that such people who are capable of abusing children, well, my friend, I want you to know they're capable of anything. I did serve for a period of time as an investigator of special victims investigations, investigating child sex abuse. And I realized real quick the danger involved in apprehending these scumbags. And Officer Anderson, well, he walked up on this particular scumbag, and unfortunately, Officer Anderson was shot several times. And Gregory Medina, well, he was on the run. Thus, that blue alert was issued. Now, Officer Anderson, who was shot by Medina, Officer Anderson was airlifted to Shands Hospital. That's where he was treated for wounds to his neck, jaw, and hands. Meanwhile, that guy Medina, Gregory, he was on the run. But my friend, I got to tell you, he decided to break into the wrong house because this bad man with a gun, he was met with a good man with a gun. The Dixie County Sheriff's Office, they said on a Facebook post that it was assisting Taylor County Sheriff's Office with the investigation into the Tuesday night shooting of Taylor County Deputy Troy Anderson. Now, the Dixie County deputies, they said they continued to assist Taylor County, and the deputies on Wednesday morning, well, they responded when a homeowner in their county reported that he had shot a man who had broke into his home. They're near Ten Mile, Florida. You see, the homeowner, he told deputies he had exchanged gunfire with a man. And that man that he exchanged gunfire with and shot, well, he was later identified as Medina. Yep, Medina, the same man who shot Deputy Taylor on a routine traffic stop. Now, Medina, he was dead when deputies got to his house. That's according to the Dixie County Sheriff's Office. So this homeowner who was armed and defended his own home, this homeowner took down this cop shooter in an exchange of gunfire. Now, I know there are those of you who probably wonder if you should arm yourself, particularly in this day and time. I can't tell you really what to do, folks. It is indeed a personal choice. However, I must ask, what if this homeowner did not have a weapon to protect himself and his family? You see, this man had already shot a cop. Do you think that he would hesitate to shoot someone else who could be a witness? Well, I don't think so. So keep this in mind, and if you're thinking about arming yourself and protecting your own home, keep that in mind. But if you do decide to arm yourself, please do take the time to train with your weapon. This man apparently did because he was in a shootout, and he prevailed in that shootout. So, my friend, our courageous citizen of the week, it's this homeowner who took down an armed cop shooter who was breaking into his home this past Wednesday morning, and he indeed is indeed our Charlie Crimebuster, courageous hero of the week. Of shooting, well, our focus this week is on the popcorn murder trial and the jury response to the shooting of Mr. Olson. That was by a retired Tampa police captain by the name of Mr. Reaves. He happened to be 71 years of age at the time of the shooting. And now, 8 years later, get that, 8 years later, now in our past podcast last week, I shared with you why it has taken so long to try this case, and you can check that out at Charliecrimebuster.com. But now, 8 years later, we do have the verdict. And that verdict, well, it was the opposite of what most thought the jury would do. You see, here is what the jury knew that most did not. First, they realized, my friend, that it wasn't about popcorn being thrown in Captain Reaves' face. You see, the media, they grabbed onto that headline as fast, well, as a supersonic jet taking off. Why? Well, because it attracted clicks online, or maybe as they used to say years ago, it sold newspapers. It does sound catchy, doesn't it? Popcorn murder trial. Man murdered over popcorn. The popcorn movie trial. Yes, there was popcorn, but the jury never balked that Olson was shot over popcorn. Now, back in January 2014, well, there were two couples that went to the theater near Tampa, Florida, to watch the movie called The Lone Survivor. Now, the Olsons, Mr. and Mrs. Olson, they sat in the row in front of the Reaves, Mr. and Mrs. Reaves. Retired Captain Reaves, according to testimony, well, he asked Mr. Olson, he asked him to put away his cell phone. The previews had begun, and he felt that Mr. Olson's cell phone was distracting him. So Mr. Olson, he reacted in an angry manner, used profanity, and refused to comply to Mr. Reaves' requests. And at this point, Mr. Reaves, Captain Reaves, he went to the management of the theater. Now, when he returned to his seat, some sort of altercation took place. Popcorn flew, and retired Captain Reaves, he shot Olson in what he claimed was self-defense. Now, the defense and the media, both together, they framed that altercation in a way that Reaves just shot Olson over popcorn. But again, the jury, well, they did not buy that. The media got that one wrong, and as it often has gotten things wrong, especially lately. You remember a few months ago, we were reminded again of how the mainstream media gets things wrong. You see, before there was a Kyle Rittenhouse trial, there was a shooting. The media had reported that a white cop shot an unarmed black man in the back. Now, following that report, well, riots broke out all over of that town in Kenosha, Wisconsin. But my friend, the media report was not true. The cops just didn't shoot a black man in the back running away. That cop and others were attempting to keep this man with an outstanding warrant. They were trying to keep him from driving away with kids in the back of a vehicle that he did not even own. And my friend, that man had a warrant out for his arrest, and he was armed. He was armed. He wasn't unarmed. He was armed with a knife. He had turned in a manner to stab the officer, and that officer, my friend, shot the man to save his own life. Now, that particular one was investigated by both local and federal and other authorities, and they found that the officer did act within the law and did protect himself and discharge his weapon correctly in the line of duty. But you see, that was not what the media reported. And that lack of responsible reporting, well, that lack of responsible reporting just did not stop there. They also lied about Kyle Rittenhouse. This was a young man, 17 years of age, who was there that night during those riots, defending his town in the midst of the riots. They actually reported that he came from another state to cause trouble. Well, while there were plenty of other people who were outsiders who came from other states to cause trouble, he did not. He actually just lived across the state line, within the very area where he worked and where his dad lived. You see, they said also that he brought a rifle across state lines illegally. He did not. He did not bring it across state lines, and the weapon he carried was not carried illegally. It was carried legally for the kind of barrel that the rifle was. They also said he was a white supremacist, out shooting people at the protests. He was not a white supremacist, and he only shot that night in self-defense. You see, we're all got to learn, including yours truly and others, not to believe that just because it's reported in the media that it is true. You see, the jury in Captain Reaves' case did not base their findings on what the media said. Let me share with you another thing that the media knew, or the jury knew rather, that we did not. This jury realized that Florida law, well, it protects elderly people. You see, it's true that in the state of Florida, here where I live, we are populated with a lot of retirees. In fact, it's jokingly said from time to time, well, that Florida is sometimes called, well, God's waiting room. You see, in the state of Florida, my friend, we do have a lot of retirees, but we also have laws to protect the elderly. In the state of Florida, it is a felony to attack someone over the age of 65. Hey, let's face it, folks. As we age, we do become more vulnerable. Now, the jury took that into consideration as according to the law. In other words, size and physical conditioning is to be considered in self-defense cases. You have the right to protect yourself with deadly force if there is a reasonable belief that you would be seriously harmed or killed. It's just that simple. Mr. Olson, he was in his 40s, over 6 foot tall, over 200 pounds, in good shape. And meanwhile, retired Captain Reaves, well, he was in his 70s. He had physical conditions regarding to his age. Now, the prosecution, they did attempt to argue all this away and say, well, he was in pretty good shape, all that. But his age and his condition, it did become a factor in the case, and one that the jury certainly considered in their verdict. Now, there's a third thing about this case that the jury considered, and we're going to tell you what that third thing is in just a moment. But now, my friend, it is time for what we call here at Charlie Crimebuster. I love it. It's called the Crazy Crook Story of the Week, and we never run out of them. You see, a criminal's main aim, well, it's to find the perfect spot in which he can execute his robbery, planning, and all of that. But this particular crazy crook, he did try to plan it. However, instead of finding the right house to rob, get this man invaded a house full of cops. And that's how he handed himself over to the police without any trouble. The guy's name was Darren Kempton. He was from Abingdon. He entered the house at night. Now get this, a house that had already been burglared earlier that night. Somebody else had broken in earlier. So, guess what? Of course, yep, there were police officers. They were there investigating the earlier break-in at the same time that this man decided to break into that house. Well, he did take off immediately. But it was not that hard. He was caught at the spot. You see, the burglary, it was unsuccessful. And from that time, he does become one of those people called the dumb crooks, and we call them crazy crooks. Now get this, interestingly, before entering that house that the police were already in, well, he tried to invade another house. He was unsuccessful there as well, and he left marks of his blood on that window. So, the cops easily linked him to that case also. And so now you can imagine the face of this crazy criminal at the time of being caught by the cops. You see, just maybe the crazy crooks out there ought to have a chat room, maybe a chat room where they all get together and let others know which house they'll be breaking into, so they don't try to break into a house that had already been broken into and the police were already there investigating. So, my friend, this man who went to a house that had already been broken into, and at that time was filled with cops who were already investigating the first break-in, well, he gets her hands down, crazy crook story of the week. Now, our focus this week is what the jury saw in the popcorn murder trial that we did not see. First, again, they say it was just not about popcorn being thrown in someone's face. You do have the right to defend yourself, including deadly force, if you are more vulnerable than others because of age and health. But next, the jury realized that just as you can, get this, contaminate a crime scene, you can contaminate a crime scene more than just with physical evidence. You see, it can also be contaminated, get this, by cross-contaminating witnesses. Now, to understand this and to make it simple, here is a good way for me to explain it to you. You've probably either played the game or at least know of the game whereby you whisper a question or a rumor in someone else's ear. They then turn and whisper it into another ear. It is sometimes called Chinese whispers, or we used to call it as kids the telephone game. And it goes around the room and it's added to until when the last one receives the account, well, it's an entirely different message or question. You see, my friend, this is one of the reasons why in proper investigations, when at all possible, you always separate the witnesses before you take their statements. Unfortunately, the investigators here either could not or did not do this. They simply put a lot of people in a common area and told them, hang on, and get this, they just handed out witnesses' statements forms for them to fill out. So they could just sit around and talk about it while they fill out their forms. You see, that type of investigation, my friend, it made such witnesses' statements unreliable. Let me give you an example. I thought one of the most damaging accounts from a witness came from a witness who reported that they heard Captain Reaves say something like this, "Throw popcorn in my face," as he shot him. Well, this again would fuel the prosecution theory that Olson was shot over popcorn. However, due to the sounds in the theater at that time and the timing of the shot, my friend, it is highly unlikely that the witness heard the defendant say such a thing. It is far more likely that it was someone else who stated that while in the group. That's what he got for throwing popcorn in his face, and from there it went from person to person to finally this guy thought that he had heard the defendant himself say, "Throw popcorn in my face." But it was from the group, not the defendant, in my belief. Again, because the witnesses, though, were not separated prior to the statements, regardless of which side you're on the case, it's just simply true that the credibility of statements were in question. Now, the investigators also ignored the surroundings. They failed to recreate the scene of a shooting, which is what you do in most every investigation. They rather stated that it was impossible to do so with so many moving parts. However, the defense countered. They countered with experts in doing their very best to recreate the scene. These experts included considering the lighting at the time, because the lights were down because of previews, the sounds, and they even showed the backlighting on the screen. They considered that backlighting, and they showed exactly how this man would look to Captain Reaves as he was there. You see, they showed the backlighting, how Mr. Olson was standing over Captain Reaves, and who was trapped, actually, with his back against the wall, facing a strong, able-bodied man about to violently attack a 71-year-old senior retired police captain. So they did indeed go the extra mile. And the jury recognized that. Now, in a moment, I'm going to share with you what I believe was the very tipping scale that really led this jury to their verdict, and why it came in so quickly. But first, let me also remind you that in just over a month, our country, we're going to be recognizing what has always been known as National Police Week. It's coming in just a couple of months. This is a time when we honor the men and women who protect us. Now, prior to that, we're also going to be launching our own Peacemaker Network. This is where we will be showing our support of the heroes that risk their lives on a daily basis to protect us. The network will provide education, connection to the kind of resources that these people need, and restoration to our cops, our first responders, and the military. So I want to invite you to please take the time to review our website that's in progress that we're actually constructing right now. And please take time to tell us what you think about it. You can review it as it's being constructed at peacemakernetwork.com. That's www.peacemakernetwork.com. Listen, my friend, our heroes, well, they're under attack in this country. Cops today are being persecuted, prosecuted, and executed. They are putting their own lives on the line every day for us, for people they do not even know. And I believe it's time for you and I to do more than just talk about supporting them. The Peacemaker Network gives you an opportunity to do just that. So please take the time to go check it out. Again, peacemakernetwork.com, and that link will be left in our show notes on your podcast platform. And we would love to have your feedback as well. So again, contact me personally, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Now, I believe, my friend, that the main reason the jury pronounced Captain Reaves not guilty was the video of the incident. You see, while the video that was being recorded was focused on another area, it did pick up the altercation. And the jury, they were able to see the video as it was enhanced. And that video revealed to this jury that Mr. Olson was the aggressor in this incident, not Captain Reaves, as the media had portrayed. They were able to see how clearly Captain Reaves was in reasonable fear of his life or great bodily harm. And it was not popcorn that caused that fear, but it was the imminent attack from an angry and aggressive Mr. Olson to a 71-year-old man, and that attack made it reasonable for retired Captain Reaves to defend himself with deadly force. My friend, Mr. Olson, he simply picked the wrong senior citizen to bully and attack that day in the theater. You see, a weapon can be an equalizer for senior citizens, though senior citizens must use those weapons in a responsible way. The jury, they come to the conclusion that Mr. Reaves, Captain Reaves, did use his weapon because he was in reasonable fear of his life or great bodily harm. But I got to tell you, folks, there are no winners for us here. A man lost his life. A wife lost her husband. A child lost her father. A retired police captain spent his last 8 years under house arrest. And there are, indeed, lessons for us all here. First, get this. Folks, just go by the rules. Most rules are there to provide safety and to create pleasure for us. You see, it has now been proved that Mr. Olson, well, he was not just texting his babysitter, as he claimed, but he was actually using social media to go on Facebook, sporting sites, and other places. He should have, as the movie theater rules were at that time when the preview started, he should have put his phone away. And by the way, you should too the next time you're in a theater or any other setting where you should not have access to your phone. Lesson number 2. Always do your best to avoid conflict. I'm quite sure that Captain Reaves, had he known that Mr. Olson would have reacted the way he did, well, I'm convinced he would have done things differently. He would have moved away, or he would have waited until the manager had handled the situation. You see, the very fact that he picked up his popcorn and sat back down in his seat proved that he did not anticipate such an aggressive, angry response from Olson over this simple texting matter. You see, my friend, the trial could have just as easily been called the angry texter murder trial, just as easily as the popcorn murder trial. I don't know what it is, whether it's this pandemic we've been through or it's just the time we're living in, but everybody appears to be on the edge, waiting, wanting to escalate conflict. Road rage, well, it's turned into road murders. A disagreement turns into an argument. An argument turns into aggression. Can't we all just work better on getting along with each other? Do we have to make it a contest of some sort every time we have a disagreement? We must learn to disagree agreeably. We must work on avoiding conflict. Or, my friend, there are going to be a lot more sad stories like this one, and these kind of stories will continue to dominate our news. So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you to avoid conflict, to be your own peacemaker in your own world. And don't forget, be safe, be alert, for the life you save, well, my friend, it may be your very own.